secret investment strategies of the 1%. But you can even use these.
Brian, I am so excited about this because this is a fun one. This is where you and I get to flex. We get to share some of the trade secrets, some of the unique things that we actually do for our wealth management clients. And not only do we get to do those things for our clients, we want to tell you about them so they can help you do money better.
My flexing is different than your flexing, though.
That's good a flex,
This is truly a Brian flex, and the fact that we get to show the muscles of financial knowledge. But I think before we get started, we ought to at least walk people through, because there's a lot of information out there, and I think a lot of people think everybody makes $1 million these days because of social media. What is the 1%?
Yeah, when we talk about 1%, if you look at total net worth in the United States right now, this is according to Don't Quit Your Day Job, it's $13.7 million. So if you want to be in the top 1% of net worth, you need a total net worth of 13.7. But if you want to be in the top 1% of income earners, the top 1% income in this country is actually $591,000 household. So when we talk about these strategies that the 1% are using, these are the people that we're talking about. However, they can even be applied to your financial situation.
And look, this is our day jobs. We're fee-only financial advisors with the fiduciary standard, and we work with lots of super successful families, a lot of these 1%ers. But what I love about this show today is we're going to walk you through some of these strategies we use, but they actually can be applicable to a lot of people who are just out there on their path to becoming the 1%.
So let's jump right in, Brian. Let's talk about the first one. Now, this is one that if you've listened to our show for any amount of time, you've heard of this, but we want to go a little bit deeper. And it is strategy number 1, backdoor Roth conversions. Now, I think we ought to level set here first, Brian. We love Roth assets. We love tax. We love them so much. We make them part of our financial order of operation. Can you hold the thing up? We make them part of our financial. They are step 5. So whenever we have an opportunity to get tax-free assets inside of your financial plan, we like to jump all over doing that.
Well, there's a lot to love. I mean, if you think about it, they have no RMDs. There's, if you go with the right custodian, low expenses and fees, tax-free growth and distributions. When I talk about the power of $1, 88 times over, I think a lot of people would be shocked when you get to your journey at 35, 40 years into the future. You're going to see there's a good chance that 90+% of your account is actually the growth of your portfolio if you started early enough. So how cool would it be if that was actually tax-free growth?
Amazing. Not only that, you have a wide selection of investments. When it comes to Roth IRA, you get to choose what you invest in. You have a flexibility with your contributions. You can choose to put money in or not to choose to put money in. You can put some money in or you can max them out. And it's not tied to your specific employer. So there are a lot of pros, a lot of benefits of Roth IRAs, but there is one caveat, one thing that you need to be aware of before you jump in whole hog.
Well, of course, the government, if they're going to give you tax-free growth, there has to be a catch. And the two big catches are they're going to have limits on how much you can contribute. And the second thing is they're going to have income limits.
That's
meaning
right.
This is not eligible for people whose income goes up beyond a certain level. For individuals who are single, it's 146 to 161. For married couples, it's 230,000 all the way up to 240,000. That's where it phases out.
So you're probably out there saying, okay, guys, I hear this. I love Roth. I love the idea of doing this. But man, I make over that income, or when my spouse and I, when we combine our incomes, we're over those limits. Is there a solution for me? And in fact, there is. Enter the backdoor Roth contribution, the backdoor Roth conversion strategy. Now, how does it work? What are the mechanics? Well, it's fairly simple. What you do is you open up a traditional IRA, a regular IRA, and you're going to make a non-deductible contribution to that. So this year in 2024, you can put $7,000 in if you're under 50. So you're going to put $7,000 into a non-deductible traditional IRA. And then because that money is after tax, when you go to convert it to Roth, you don't pay any taxes. Now, a lot of people ask, well, what happens if I don't convert it? What if I just left it in the traditional IRA? Well, your money would still grow tax deferred, but then when you go to pull those dollars out of that traditional IRA, You'll pull out your contributions tax-free, but all of those earnings, all of that growth is still going to be taxed. That's why we love you being able to convert it to Roth, so then everything becomes tax-free.
I always like people to know kind of how these things came to be, because it's not like the legislators got together and they said, you know what would be cool is if we named something the backdoor Roth IRA. And the reason these things exist, and I'm old enough and been doing this long enough that I remember when this legislation changed. In 2010, the tax laws changed to where now Roth conversions, meaning turning IRA assets, traditional IRA assets, or rollover IRA assets, any type of IRA asset into a Roth. It used to have $100,000 a year, meaning your income couldn't be over $100,000 to even have this as an option. Well, in 2010, they ripped off the income limit, meaning anyone could do a Roth conversion as long as you're willing to pay the income taxes. So the super, sweet sauce of this thing is that since you're making a non-deductible contribution, meaning you didn't take the tax deduction, you have basis. And then when you take advantage of that tax law change from 2010 and you convert it into a Roth, voila, you just made a backdoor Roth contribution. So it's kind of the super secret name that is kind of everybody now knows, but it was never designed to be this way. And the government has actually tried to take this away a few times, but it has so far survived, and you ought to check this out.
So how do you know if this is the right choice for you? Well, the first thing you have to define is, can you do it? And so question number one is, are you above the Roth income limit? If the answer to that question is no, you don't have to do a backdoor Roth. If your income is below the Roth threshold, you ought to just consider making direct Roth contributions. There's no point in making this any more complicated than it has to be.
Yeah, I mean, because this is a multiple step transaction versus just making an IRA contribution. It's just a transfer, make the contribution, but you just can't exceed the income limits. Now, the second thing, and this is an important one, I get a text message from a really close friend. He goes, man, I've been listening to your content. And I got so excited about these backdoor Roth contributions. I ripped, and I just made a backdoor Roth contribution. I said, well, wait a minute. I remember us having quite a few conversations, usually with a bourbon in hand or something. And and I always told you, hey, you have that rollover IRA out there. You can't do it. And he goes, you can't have other assets? Other IRAs? What? And I was like, oh gosh. I was like, no, you call me on these things because this is where it gets complicated. So if you can only have Roth, after-tax, or inherited IRAs. If you have any other type of IRA, like a SEP IRA, a simple IRA, a rollover IRA where you had an old 401k and you rolled it into an IRA, it blows up this entire scenario. And a lot of people, now look, nobody is going to stop you. If you call your custodian and say, I want to turn that IRA and convert a portion of this into Roth, they'll be like, no problem. How much you want to do? They don't have stop measures to keep you. It just means you're creating a tax liability issue for yourself. So it's a trap or something to be very aware of.
Yeah, some really easy math here. Let's assume that you had $93,000 in an IRA rollover and you decide you're going to do this backdoor Roth. And so you put $7,000 non-deductible into a traditional IRA. What the IRS is going to say is, of the whole $100,000 of IRA assets that you have, only 7% of that conversion will be tax-free. So if you were to convert even that $7,000 you put in, only 7% of it's going to be tax-free. So you cannot do it, or you cannot do it tax-free if you have other IRA assets. So then the question becomes, all right, I know how to do it. When should I do it? When does this make sense? And our general thought is, if you can, then you probably should. If you are at the place in your financial journey where you have the ability to make backdoor Roths and your income is over the threshold and it's a mechanism for you to get $7,000 or maybe $14,000 for a household and tax-free assets, it's probably a strategy that you should take advantage of.
I also would encourage you, this is one of those, where are you at in the financial order of operations? If you go to moneyguy.com/resources, you can download your own copy. If you really want to deep dive into all the origins of the financial order of operations, I encourage you to go to moneyguy.com/millionaire mission. Brand new book I have coming out in May. But pay attention to where you are, because backdoor Roths fall under step 5 of the financial order of operations.
And so when are some times that you shouldn't do this? We already mentioned the first one. If you have any other IRA assets to trigger the pro rata rule, this will not be tax-free, so be mindful of that. And if you're not 100% sure you're doing this right, maybe this is not something you should go at on your own. Maybe you should seek guidance from a professional, because these can be complicated transactions, and oftentimes we see them reported incorrectly on tax returns. The Form 8606s get jacked up. They end up being reported as taxable. You don't catch it. You end up paying taxes you did not need to pay. So make sure you understand what you're doing, how to see it through all the way to your tax return.
Let me go ahead and give everybody a heads up, because I have written so many tax letters to the IRS to clarify these Roth conversion strategies, because here's the way this scenario plays out. Your custodian is going to send you a notice, a 1099 at the end of the year, 1099-R, and it's going to show that you had a $7,000 distribution, and then it's going to say taxable portion, $7,000 distribution. And then you're going to be like, oh my gosh, these guys just created a taxable contribution for me. And you're going to give this form to your tax preparer. They're going to file it as a taxable contribution. And nobody's going to notice that there's this little box that's checked on that 1099-R that says taxable amount not determined. And that's why it's on you and your tax preparer to report that, no, this was a contribution of a non-deductible IRA, traditional IRA. We then converted it and had full tax basis. So there is a zero tax report and tax requirement. You'll have to show that you took a distribution of this amount, but zero of it was taxable because you structured it right and you reported it right. It's so easy to prove with the 5329s, as well as just you having the statements with the transactions, but this gets screwed up a ton. And this is why sometimes it's better to have somebody to help you navigate the complexity of this.
All right, Brian, if backdoor Roths are good, you know what's better than a backdoor Roth?
Oh, an apex predator.
How about a mega backdoor Roth conversion? This is strategy number 2 that we see a lot of our high net worth, high income clients carry out, and you can carry it out too. Now, where this is a little bit different than backdoor Roth contributions is this one specifically has to take place inside of your 401k, inside of your employer-sponsored retirement plan.
Yeah, this is one where I think people, and the government did this as well, is they're like, we're going to give them these tax-free growth opportunities with these IRAs, but we'll make sure it's somewhat digestible, whether it's $7,000 in your IRA or $23,000 through your employer 401k, and then some brilliant person figured out that, oh my gosh, once again, with this Roth conversion provision having no income limits and really no caps, how about if we structured a retirement plan, an employer retirement plan, where it took and figured out how do we maximize the entire 415 limit of the $69,000, and voila, an apex predator was created called mega backdoor Roth conversions. I'll let Bo give you the actual details, but I wanted you to at least have the children's story narrative so you kind of know how this all happened.
So most people know that when it comes to putting money in a 401k, you generally have 2 options. You can do pre-tax or you can do Roth. Well, there is a third option called after-tax. Now, after-tax is different than Roth, even though they sound the same. Both pre-tax and Roth contributions are limited to the salary deferral limits, which in 2024, for those under 50, is $23,000. However, if you're able to contribute to the after-tax bucket, you can actually go all the way up to those 415 limits that Brian said. So you can do $23,000 of pre-tax contributions, and then you can take the remainder all the way up to $69,000 as after-tax 401k contributions. Well, when you do that, what that allows you to do is fill up your whole bucket. So a total of $69,000 a year can be put into your 401k, and that's a combination of salary deferrals that you put in, plus employer contributions that you put in. We'll talk more about that in a moment, plus the after-tax contributions. Well, if you're putting in after-tax contributions in there, one of the great things you can do, if your plan allows for in-service conversions or in-service rollovers, is you can actually immediately roll those contributions, those after-tax dollars you put in, into a Roth IRA. What you have effectively done at that time is taken after-tax 401k contributions and converted into Roth completely tax-free.
So in theory, if you take out all the other variables we're about to go through that kind of lowers this down a little bit, but in theory, you could actually make a $69,000 Roth contribution in through a mega backdoor Roth.
That's insane.
It's insane. And by the way, if you're just a calculator nerd and you want to just go put in annual contributions of $69,000, holy cow, this is a big deal. But there's some catches, and it's probably, so let's talk about, can you do it, and what are the things to watch for?
The very first thing is, does your plan allow for in-service distributions or in-plan conversions? Because the way that the after-tax bucket normally works is if you were to put money into the after-tax bucket and just let it be invested, those dollars are going to grow tax deferred. And when you go to pull them out in retirement, you'll get your contributions back tax free, but all the earnings would be taxed. It is the in-service conversion or in-service rollover that allows you to turn those dollars into Roth dollars. And Roth dollars are the dollars that are truly tax free. So you need to make sure, in addition to having an after-tax 401k contribution option, it also has an in-service distribution or in-plan conversion offer.
And then the other thing on if you can do this requires a lot of money. Meaning you have to have a big shovel, a big income. This is not something that right as you're coming, right out of college and you're starting your first job. That's why we talked about doing Roth contributions are step 5 elements. I think this is more advanced planning. This is getting into step 7 and maybe even beyond. You have to have a big cash flow to be able to even contribute at these levels.
Okay, so now let's talk about, if that's how you do it, when should you do it? When does this make sense? Well, again, this is one of those, if you can, then you likely should, but you really have to define if you can. And you just went through, do you have a lot of income? Because to be able to save that much in a qualified retirement account, it takes a pretty big shovel. And then you need to also be aware of the times when maybe this doesn't make sense. Here's some reasons why you shouldn't do this. Number one, and this is a big one, if you fill up your 415 limit, if you get all $69,000 in there before your employer is able to put their matching contributions into your 401k, you know what happens? You just missed out on a match. You missed out on free money. And remember, step 2 of the financial order of operations is employer match. So you want to make sure that you're not crowding out any matching money, any safe harbor money, or any profit sharing money. So you need to have a decent understanding of the dollars that your employer is also putting into your plan.
Yeah, I think that this is a big one, is that you want to make sure you're leaving enough room. And a lot of times those profit sharing contributions won't come in until the following year after you have to kind of make a guesstimate of how much your employer is going to give you and leave enough at the top. Just like when you go to a cup of coffee, they say, do you need room for cream? You're like, yeah, I need room for employer match and profit sharing in the way you do your mega backdoor Roth. The second thing that you got to think about is, because I've seen this, small business owners. A lot of times you'll wonder, why do I not see this on the tax returns for more small business owners? Well, what happens is if you own a company and you get to design the plan, when you add the profit sharing provision, or you might add even a cash balance plan, you're trying to maximize the deductible contributions. You're in those tippity top tax rates, like 37% marginal federally. Yep. And then maybe if you live in a state like California, you're even in some of those tax rates like 13%. So you can see 50 cents on the dollar is going towards taxes. So why not try to see if we can lower that? And through proper plan design, a good small business owner can probably design a 401k with a profit sharing provision, and then put a cash balance plan, and then get a lot bigger deductible contributions that the government's essentially going to fund half of it through tax savings. You're going to go down that path. So where do we actually see this more often is usually the very highly compensated executives or W-2 employees for big companies. So that's where I've typically seen this. You don't see it as much for small business owners because you'd prefer to have the deductible contributions.
The other area or other time when maybe you don't want to do this, again, is if you're not 100% sure you're doing it right. Because frankly, this can get complicated. Some employers will let you set it up where it happens automatically, but a lot of times you'll have to make a phone call. And even when you go to make that phone call to the in-plan conversion, a lot of times if you've had after-tax contributions, there's some earnings component. And so when you do your distribution, you may have to roll the after-tax contributions to a Roth, but then you might have to roll the earnings into a traditional IRA. Well, if you did that and you're doing regular backdoor Roths, now you violated the pro rata rule. So then you have to have a system to get those dollars from the traditional IRA back into your 401k. So there are a lot of logistics that go into this. Again, if backdoor Roths is checkers, mega backdoor Roths is 3D chess. So you want to make sure you really understand what you're doing. If you don't, this might be a great time to seek professional help to make sure you're carrying these transactions out correctly and to make sure they're reflected correctly on your tax return when you go to file your taxes next year.
I mean, it really is a shepherding of the process. Like I have a doctor client that we basically every year have to kind of nudge the employer, which the doctor is very, very involved with that. We then have to nudge the custodian. Then we have to follow up because there's a lot of steps that are going through there. And then the other thing I think is unique is every one of these is through a unique plan design, meaning all retirement plans have plan documents and they're all written a little bit differently. So one plan will allow you to do in-plan conversions, meaning they're actually going to handle this mega backdoor Roth conversion opportunity. Whereas another one might just allow in-plan distribution, in-service distributions where you don't have to be retired to take a distribution and you're going to do this manually on your own. So all that just adds an element. It's a great planning opportunity, but there's also a lot of traps or missteps you can make, and we just want to make sure you go into this with your eyes wide open because this can get complicated.
All right, Brian, so we've talked about backdoor Roths, talked about mega backdoor Roths. Let's talk about what I think probably is my favorite financial savings vehicle because it is just so sexy, if we're going to be honest, and a lot of people are able to take advantage of these. Health savings accounts.
Oh man, triple, if not quattro tax advantage. If you think about these things, I've been doing a lot of interviews for Millionaire Mission. If you go to moneyguy.com/millionaire mission, I have a book coming out in May. And one of the question that I'm getting a lot is, Brian, I see step 5, tax-free growth has got both Roth IRA and HSA. What's your favorite? And I'm always like, man, don't ask a parent what their favorite child is, but I will give you an answer. And and it surprises people. I love health savings accounts because they are a triple tax advantage. It also is a closet way to really check off several of the earlier steps because deductibles covered. If you have a health savings account that keeps a portion of it to cover deductibles, you're already kind of accomplishing things. But here's why I say triple, if not even quattro tax advantage. When you make a contribution to a health savings account, it's fully deductible. That's pretty sweet.
No matter your income.
No matter your income, too. The second thing, if you choose to invest the money in your health savings account, as it grows, it's completely tax deferred, meaning the government's not going to tax you on those annual gains that you have. And then if you use that health savings account for qualified medical expenses, it will be pulled out completely tax-free. That's the third. And then here's the quattro. If your employer not only offers a high deductible health plan, but also a payroll deducted health savings account contribution, you can save Social Security and Medicare taxes for both you and the employer by implementing that quattro extra opportunity.
But wait, there's more. It's not even current year medical expenses. You can actually reimburse yourself from an HSA for prior medical expenses that you incurred. So if you've been keeping a record of the bills that you've been paying, at some point in the future, as that account has continued to grow, you can then go reimburse yourself for procedures or bills that you had a year ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago. They are amazing and they are incredible vehicles. And we're seeing more and more companies make them available. And yet, I would argue that they're not widely adopted the way that we would imagine they'd be widely adopted, considering how good they are.
Now, I want to take some credit for this change because I was shocked by this data update that Megan was able to provide to me, but I was also proud of this data update, is that I have for years been saying one of the saddest things about this super powerful tool of the health savings account is people are only taking advantage of the contribution, the deduction, then they use it as a clearing account and yank the money right back out. So that's it's missing out on 2 of the triple tax advantage, meaning it's not taking advantage of the tax deferred, it's not taking advantage of the tax free when those assets grow and then you pull them out for the qualified medical expenses. So in the past, I've always said 96% of people use these accounts only as clearing accounts. Well, good news, guys. It seems like over the last 6 years, y'all have been listening to us harp on this. Now that number's increased from 4% of people actually saving and investing their HSA into 13%. Kudos that now it seems like 1 out of 10 people is actually using this the financial mutant way.
It's getting better. And so if you were curious, but there are limits. It's so good that the government does put limits on there. So in 2024, for individuals that are covered under a high deductible plan, we'll talk more about that in a moment, they can contribute $4,150 to an HSA, but families can actually do $8,300. So it's even a little bit more than you can put into an individual IRA. So the question becomes, can you do it? Okay, guys, I'm sold. I love it. I hear you. How do I know? Well, the first thing you have to figure out is, do you qualify to contribute to an HSA? And there's one really, really big thing that you need in order to qualify. Are you participating in a high deductible health plan? If you have a plan that has copays, or you're in Cadillac insurance, or in anything that's not an HSA qualified high deductible health plan, you unfortunately cannot participate and contribute to a health savings account.
Yeah, and be aware of that. I mean, a lot of people, because maybe you do have a high deductible health plan at your workplace, but you have a cafeteria plan that also has a really great, normal Cadillac type plan that covers everything just with copays. Be strategic about that. If you're growing your family in the coming year, or you have big medical expenses, like I hit a key age this year, so I'm having to do a little bit more additional testing and other things that that's a whole nother thing. So I know that those costs are going to be higher. So I chose to go for a better, more beneficial plan this year while expenses were so high for my wife and I, and then I'll probably go back to the high deductible later. So be strategic about that, but just know you can't do an HSA if you don't have access to a high deductible health plan.
And then the other thing is you also, if you're participating in a flexible spending account, you can't double dip. You can't do a flexible spending account as well as a health savings account. Now, limited purpose FSAs are okay, so you want to make sure that you check with your HR department to understand, okay, is this FSA going to let me still do an HSA, or is this going to preclude me from doing that? You want to understand that. And Brian, so you just said something so interesting, and you went through this. One of the things you have to answer when it comes to, okay, should I do this? Is this right for me? You do need to answer the question, is a high deductible health plan right for? Because we see people all the time that say, I want to do HSA, want to do HSA, want to do HSA, and they're kind of missing the forest for the trees. They're kind of cutting their nose off despite, all the sayings, right? They're doing all those things.
Well, it's also the tax tail wagging the dog.
All of the
and
things.
the fact that you need to think about your specific situation. What are the needs that you'll have in healthcare, and just plan accordingly. Don't, I see it here. I mean, it's kind of an amazing thing with all my financial planners to see how they're strategically using our different plans. And I would just encourage you to do the exact thing. Be a full financial mutant and make sure that the high deductible health plan is right for your family.
And so then the next thing you have to say is, if I want to be part of that 13% that's really getting the triple tax advantage or even quadruple tax advantage, is, do I actually have enough cash flow to pay for medical expenses out of pocket? Because remember, you're not going to use your HSA intra-year. You're not going to put money in and then pull it out. You got to put money into it, let it grow, and so all of the other medical expenses that you bear, you'll have to pay for out of pocket. So you want to make sure that you have cash flow and a budget that can substantiate and sustain that. If that's the case, welcome to the 13% club. It's pretty awesome. You're going to love being able to take advantage of this account.
I also like that it does have the benefit of being a cash reserve if you had to. We want you to keep the money invested, but if you ever got cash strapped or you had a big emergency, you could go pull your deductible out of this, no problem. You could cover the expenses. Another thing that we didn't even talk about that's awesome about health savings accounts is that these things actually can be, closeted retirement accounts.
Oh yeah, that's right.
That you actually can use this to pay for retirement expenses. You will pay income taxes on any gains when you use it for that way, but it's penalty free, which is kind of nice, because I think a lot of people, they worry, is it going to be okay if I fund this? What if I don't have a lot of medical expenses? You probably will, but what if I don't? It's okay, because these assets will be able to help you out and subsidize your retirement as well.
Love it. All right, Brian. So we've talked about some things that are fairly exclusive, right? Mega backdoors, HSAs. Let's talk about some strategies that maybe anyone or almost anyone can also implement, and certainly wealthy 1%ers, high net worth individuals, high income individuals do this. And this falls in the category of small marginal optimization tweaks that can have big impacts. And what we're talking about is capital gains planning, whether that be through loss harvesting, gain acceleration, or capital gain avoidance.
Yeah, this is something we use for every one of our clients, and I even use this personally. This is one of those what we call financial mutant silver lining moments. Is when the market goes through its 2 out of every 10 years, decade, where it's going through bear markets. Market volatility, and your investments are going down. We turn those lemons into lemonade by actually using these strategies.
Yeah, so let's talk about loss harvesting first. What is that? Well, it's simply selling a security at a loss so that you can offset gains either this current year or in the future, or on securities that are sold at a profit. So if the market goes down and you say, man, I lost $10,000 in that investment, rather than having to wait for that investment to come back up, you could sell it at that point. You could take that $10,000 loss and you could use it to offset other current year capital gains. Or if you don't have any other capital gains, it can even offset $3,000 of ordinary income. And if you still have losses, you can actually carry it forward into the next year.
Yeah, this is just like the name implies. It is a true harvesting because, look, when you have these things going on, it's nice to be able to lock in paper losses, but still keep the money working. But I got to tell you got to be careful because, and Bo, I'd love for you to walk them through how does this actually work? Because there's going to be a key word that I want everybody to pay attention to. You have to avoid the wash sell rules, and Bo can walk you through this in as you go through the process.
Yeah, it's really interesting. You may be saying, well, guys, why on earth would I ever sell an investment that lost? Isn't that timing the market? Isn't that selling at the world's worst time? Wouldn't that make me a bad investor? Well, what we're actually saying is loss harvesting is a strategy that you can implement from a tax perspective while still keeping your investment portfolio intact. Because what you want to do is when you sell a security, you can then reinvest those dollars in a different security, in a different investment, a different opportunity. So if you're coming through something like a bear market and all of the general asset classes and all of the general indices are down, it might not be uncommon for you to sell one type of holding and then go buy a different type of holding that's also down. So that way when the market recovers, you can make that. You want to make sure, though, that when you're selling and buying, you are buying materially different types of investments, because if you were to just sell Apple stock and try to loss harvest that, and the next day you went and bought Apple stock again, you would not be able to do that. That would be considered a wash sale, and that loss would not be able to be used. The alternative, if you were to wait 30 days post-sale and then buy your Apple stock back, then it would be a permissible loss. So you have to make sure you understand what you're selling and what you're buying so that you don't run afoul of the wash sale rules.
The tax language is actually substantially similar. So you just want to make sure you're aware of that, because we do want to keep your money working, but we also want to be very legal in how we're making this transition to keep the assets working but to lock in those paper losses.
Now, another thing you can do, we talk about loss harvesting and taking advantage of losses. Well, one of the other things you can do is actually gain acceleration. It might make sense for you to sell a security at a gain in order to accelerate that income, to force it into a taxable event. And there are a number of reasons why you might want to do this. Maybe you're in a lower income year. Maybe you have losses that you can use. Or maybe this year you might be in the 0% capital gains rate. And so you want to recognize some of those gains so that you can take advantage of that. So just like sometimes it makes sense to have losses accelerated, sometimes it also makes sense to have gains accelerated.
Yeah, this is one where I've seen this play out several different ways. And in fact, you talked about the 0% capital gains, married couples, that's a little right around the 80,000 mark. I've also seen this where somebody gets like an opportunity of a lifetime, like something really good, a piece of real estate or something comes their way, and they're like, hey, I need you guys to come up with this amount of money so I can make this deal happen. And we're like, man, every one of those holdings got a pretty good gain. Well, that's when we'll say, well, hey, but we harvested all those losses in the last downturn. It's okay if we go ahead and bring some of that forward so that we can create the liquidity for you. It's okay.
So then the question becomes, all right, well, can I do this? What's required if I want to take advantage of one of these strategies? Well, step number one, you have to have a taxable brokerage account. Neither of these strategies make any kind of sense inside of a rollover IRA or a Roth IRA or a 401k. It needs to be a currently taxable account, so a brokerage account or a trust account or something like that. The other thing you have to answer is, are there securities that I want to sell? Do I actually have securities that are held at a loss if I'm looking at tax loss harvesting? Or do I have securities that are held at a gain that I'm trying to exit, that I'm trying to get out of? If you have a portfolio that's intact, that looks the way you want it to, you may not need to take any action, but if there's an opportunity in your portfolio, you ought to at least assess this annually to see, can I take advantage of these strategies?
So let's talk about, should you do this? I always think it's really all about the tax planning, and I don't know if a lot of people put enough effort into understanding how do you strategically, legally, because remember, tax evasion is illegal, but tax avoidance and planning is actually highly encouraged.
Yeah.
I mean, we have a huge tax code that shows you that. And that's why I think that you need to really look at what is the need. And if you need a tax break now, or if you just want to be strategic while you're in this unfortunate situation of a bad market, why not lock in some of these losses? Or maybe you had a business venture that went wrong and you have this huge capital loss that's being carried forward. There's nothing wrong with accelerating gains to take advantage of that. You just have to kind of know where you are, and then also be very, actually plan. I mean, I think that's the thing. Don't let life just happen to you. Actually be an active participant in maximizing what your money can become.
Another thing that you can do is you can see if I want to balance out low income and high income years. I'll tell you a really quick story. I have some dear clients of mine that in 2008, they bought some tech indices, right? And these tech indices were super, super low then. Well, over the last 15 years, they've done really, really, really well. And all the while, this was a high income family, and they had such large embedded gains inside these holdings, there was nothing we could really do with it because we didn't want to trigger the taxation. So we built a portfolio around these large embedded gains. Well, fast forward, now that they are beginning to retire and their income is dropping, we say, okay, this is a great opportunity for us to accelerate gains up to the 0% capital gains bracket this year so we can begin dialing down the risk in their portfolio. Rather than us having sold those securities previously, having triggered 23.8% long-term capital gains, we're going to pay 0% capital gains because their income situation has changed. So you need to understand, is that a situation I'm in? Is there a unique thing about my income this year that might make one of these strategies make sense for me?
The key thing that you just shared is another key reason on why you should consider doing this. And we put it on the slide, is that if you're expecting to have a substantial drop in your tax rate, like retirement or moving to different states, these strategies can definitely be helpful, but you've got to understand the time, and you also have to create the plan to execute and make this work.
All right, now, Brian, we did do one honorable mention, and I want to mention this because this is kind of a unique thing that I think not a lot of people recognize. But if you are a mutual fund investor, one of the things that happens is during the year, while mutual funds are buying and selling, there are capital transactions taking place, but you don't pay taxes on those capital transactions at the time it happens. The fund companies will actually distribute those capital gains out to you at the end of the year. Well, one of the things that you can do, if you so choose, is you can look at a capital gain avoidance strategy. This is actually something, Brian, I learned from you many years ago, and something we execute for our clients every single year.
By the way, if you want to get on the naughty list with your favorite mutual fund provider, this is one they're not going to love. It is completely legal, but they don't like you to avoid this because it creates more work for them. But this is important. I mean, it was just a few years ago, I think it was both Fidelity and Vanguard had huge distributions on some of their funds.
I mean, it's like 18, 20%.
Yeah, we're talking, when your net asset value and then you have a distribution that's close to 20% of the entire value of the holding, you can imagine how this is a tax bomb. Mm-hmm. So, and then they're legally required to date. I mean, tell you the date that they're going to use, the recorded date, and then the date they're going to distribute this. If you have that knowledge, it's kind of crazy, especially if you had this holding and maybe you bought into it without knowing that it had all these embedded gains on it. It kind of is definitely in your favor to not take a 20% income hit when maybe you're flat to even down, or maybe only up 1% or 2%. You should be strategic with how you handle this.
What about the folks out there, Brian, saying, wait, you're telling me that there's going to be a 20% distribution? That sounds like a 20% rate of return. Why on earth would I sell this thing? Why would I not continue to hold this fund if they're going to have such a huge distribution?
No, they adjust for that. And that's what I think a lot of people think when I see these big income distributions, this is going to be great because that's that passive income that I saw that social media person talk about. The problem is they actually adjust the net asset value price, meaning the day they distribute it, they actually adjust the price of the holding. So net, you end up at the same place, but now you have a big tax bill to pay.
So here's what you do. At the end of every year, you go to your fund company's website. You just look, okay, what are these funds estimating their capital gain distributions are going to be? What is the record date that's going to be recorded if I hold this where I get the distribution? If my gain in the holding is less than the distribution, maybe it makes sense for me to sell, or maybe not, but I at least know what's coming so that I don't get a big tax surprise. This is something you can do every year at the end of the year. It's not incredibly complicated, but it can be incredibly valuable over the long term.
So let's talk about when you should do it. This is typically a third, fourth quarter, primarily fourth quarter action, because that's when all the big income gets distributed out. If it's at the end of the year, just kind of give this a look. But the key date is not the date they pay. It's actually know the record date, the date that they actually look at who is the holders, because you don't want to just look at the payment date and think if you get out and then you actually have a record date, you might actually get a distribution of a fund that you even no longer hold, which is kind of a weird thing.
And then if your gains from the fund are smaller than the distributions you pay, it might make sense to sell. It doesn't always, but you at least want to know it so you know what you're getting yourself into.
Yeah, I always say don't let the tax tail wag the dog, and the fact of, because this is something we work with our advisors when they first, because you see a cool tool like this and you're like, well, we ought to do this on everything. If you're up 1 or 2%, we ought to, or you're down 1, but pay attention, because if the distribution's like 3%, but it's a really good fund, where you really, this is a great index fund that there's not a lot of, dissimilar funds that you're going to be able to take and roll right into, then you might want to just, hey, it's okay to take a 1 or 2% distribution and just grin and bear it. You have to kind of know where the materiality is or where the hassle factor is, but that goes into the secret sauce of being a good, experienced advisor. This all comes to, I think about what's it like to become a client. I was hanging out with an old neighbor from Georgia, and this guy's a builder, and he was telling me he used to do tons of homes, but he's getting a little bit older, and he's like, I'm doing 5 or 6 homes a year now, and he told me what he gets paid, multiple 6 figures for each home he takes on from clients. And I'm like, but that probably doesn't take, because I was like, how hard is that? And he's like, well, it's not the hardest thing, but he goes, the biggest thing I can do for clients is that I know where the trouble is, and I know where I can tell if somebody's not building the house right or a sub is doing something wrong. So I said, well, let me ask you this. Would you say that it took your 30 years of, it takes you only a few hours a day to go stop by and make sure that project's going well, but it took 30 years of you doing this and actually developing an expertise? And he goes, exactly. And that's why I get this premium. And I was like, I think you and I have a lot in common with the way we do this stuff, is that a lot of people think that there's not value in hiring advisors and stuff because they can just do it. And I don't disagree on the basic stuff. Hence why in 2006, we started creating content for you to be a better version of yourself and be a do-it-yourselfer who actually learns the secrets and has the access to know what the wealthy people are doing with their money. But I got to tell you, if I do this well enough and I teach you this, you will start reaching a level of complexity that you never realized was coming your way. And that's with, just like you would want to hire a good builder to build the house of your future, the house that you plan on retiring, why not hire a good financial advisor that can have all that experience, all that knowledge to make sure that you navigate this well as complexity hunts you down and finds you. And that's what we've been doing for the last 18 years. And I got to tell you, you guys, you're phenomenal. We have built this beautiful billion-dollar firm off of all my financial mutants who have recognized, yeah, we're filling the cup, giving you as much free advice as we can, but eventually that abundance cycle works. Come take it all. Go to moneyguy.com/resources. Get all the free stuff we offer, all the tools. But when you get complicated, I would encourage you to go to Money Guy or Abound Wealth and go to those websites and look at the Become a Client or Work with Us tabs. And I think you'll see that we can help make your journey easier.
All the strategies we laid out today are optimization strategies because we believe that there is a better way to do money. And we believe that small decisions today, small tweaks today, can have huge outcomes for your future. And we would love to get to be part of that journey with you.
Guys, I'm your host, Brian Preston, Mr. Bo Hansen. There's more than money. It's all about knowing where your purpose, where abundance is in your life. Money Guy team, out.